The great hall of Etherian was filled with hundreds of people. The air was warm from the glow of golden candles, and the sound of quiet voices echoed around the tall marble walls. Nobles in bright clothes whispered behind jeweled fans, and servants moved quickly, afraid to be noticed. At the far end of the hall, on a raised throne, sat Queen Alara. Her green gown shone under the light. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with anger. She looked down at her daughter, Princess Mara, who stood near the throne, with her head bowed. Mara's hands trembled. There were tears on her cheeks, though she tried to hide them. Around her, the court waited in silence. Everyone knew something serious was about to happen. The queen stood, her jewels glittering. Her voice rose, sharp and strong. It cut through the hall like thunder. "Who got my daughter pregnant?" The sound of those words shocked everyone. Several nobles gasped. One dropped his goblet. The sound of it breaking on the stone floor echoed in the silence that followed. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the courtiers who liked gossip looked down at the floor, afraid of the queen's anger. Mara pressed her hands together and closed her eyes. She had known this moment would come, but knowing it and facing it were very different things. Queen Alara's voice grew colder. "Someone will answer me, now." Still, silence filled the hall. The guards looked at each other but said nothing. The queen's advisors shifted uncomfortably, afraid to meet her eyes. Then, from the very back of the room, came the sound of footsteps. Slow, steady footsteps that echoed against the floor. Every head turned. A young man stepped forward. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing the simple gray uniform of a royal guard. 8. His dark hair was still damp from the morning rain. His face was calm, but there was a quiet strength in his eyes. His name was Ethan Gray. He stopped a few paces from the throne, bowed slightly, and then stood straight. "I did," he said quietly. "Now." His voice, though soft, carried across the entire hall. A collective whisper ran through the crowd. Some people gasped, others muttered in disbelief. A guard? A common man? How could this be? Queen Alara's eyes narrowed. "You dare say that?" "Yes, Your Majesty," Ethan said. He kept his voice steady. "I am the one." The queen stared at him, unable to believe what she was hearing. She had expected fear, denial, excuses, but this man stood there with calm honesty, his gaze unwavering. Mara lifted her head then. Her face was pale, but her eyes filled with sudden courage. She looked from her mother to Ethan, her heart pounding. The queen's voice rose again. "Do you know what you have done? Do you understand what shame you have brought to this crown?" Ethan took a deep breath. "I understand everything, Your Majesty, and yet I cannot lie. What happened between the princess and me was not a trick or a crime. It was love." A wave of shocked whispers filled the hall again. The queen's advisors leaned forward, horrified. One of them, an older man, hurried to speak. "Your Majesty, this is nonsense. The man is lying. Guards should not even speak to a princess except by command." But Queen Alara raised her hand for silence. Her gaze did not leave Ethan. "You think love excuses your crime?" she asked. "I do not ask for excuses," he said simply. "I only tell the truth. Whatever punishment you give me, I will accept." Mara's voice shook, but she stepped forward. "Mother, please. He speaks the truth." It was not a moment of carelessness. It was a bond that grew between us. You may not understand, but we could not help it. The queen turned to her daughter, pain visible behind her anger. She loved Mara more than her own life, but now she felt betrayed. "Do you know what your choices have done to this kingdom?" she said in a trembling voice. "How can a princess lower herself in such a way?" Mara stood straight. "I did not lower myself, Mother. I followed my heart." The crowd could hardly breathe. Never had anyone spoken to the queen like that, not even the bravest of nobles. Queen Alara sank back into her throne slowly. Her fingers gripped the armrest, and she stared into the distance. The hall was silent, except for the quiet sound of rain tapping against the great windows. For the first time, the queen had no words. She saw before her two young people, afraid yet honest, standing together. Something inside her shifted, though she did not yet understand what it was. Still, her duty as ruler would not allow mercy so easily. At last, she said in a quiet voice, Bring them both to the council chamber at dawn. The truth will be judged there. Ethan bowed. As you wish, Your Majesty. Mara tried to reach for him, but the guards stepped forward. Ethan was led away, and the door closed behind him with a heavy sound. In the great silence that followed, Queen Alara looked once more at her daughter. Her heart ached between anger and sorrow, torn between being a mother and being a queen. Outside, thunder rolled across the valley. Inside the palace, the storm had already begun. The night after Ethan was taken from the Great Hall, the palace of Ethereum was quiet. The long corridors were empty, and the sound of the rain outside made the air cold and heavy. Guards stood at every corner, watching for danger, though the real storm was not the rain, it was the queen's anger. Queen Alara sat alone in her private chamber. The fire burned low, and the light flickered across her face. Her crown lay on the table beside her, forgotten for once. She was no longer the ruler of 10 kingdoms in that moment. She was only a mother, struggling to understand how her world had broken apart in one night. In her mind, she saw Mara as a little girl again, running through the gardens and laughing among the roses. Alara had imagined so many things for her daughter: a marriage to a prince, a strong alliance, a future that would keep the kingdom safe. But now everything was different. The throne itself seemed to shake beneath this scandal. When the door opened quietly, Alara turned. Her old advisor, Lord Warren, entered and bowed. His expression was cautious. Your Majesty, the guards have locked Ethan Grey in the lower wing of the army barracks. He shows no fear, only silence. Alara lifted her chin. And the people. There are whispers already, Warren said. Some call him a fool. Some call him brave. But all of them talk about it. The queen rose and walked to the window. Outside, the rain fell harder, turning the palace gardens into small pools of silver water. This kingdom cannot live on whispers, she said, her voice quiet but hard. Tomorrow, he will face the council. Truth will be placed before us all. Mara, meanwhile, sat in her room, 2 floors above. The walls felt like a prison, the air heavy with sadness. She had begged to see Ethan, but the guards had refused. She sat by the window, her hand over her stomach, fearing what would happen to him. She knew her mother's temper, and she also knew her strength. The queen would not easily show pity. She remembered the first time she had met Ethan. He had been a new guard, barely 20 years old. There had been a small rebellion near the border, and he had saved her life during an attack. After that, she had seen him almost every day. He was kind, quiet, and had no hunger for power. While the royal court was full of lies and flattery, this young soldier spoke honestly. That honesty had drawn her toward him slowly and naturally. They had talked under the moonlight, shared stories, and soon shared hearts. She had known the risk, but had not cared. Now looking at the rain, she wondered if she had doomed him. Down in the barracks, Ethan sat behind the wooden bars of the guard cell. He was not afraid. He had faced battle before, but this felt heavier. Not because of the danger, but because he might lose Mara forever. A young soldier brought him food, but he did not eat, sat still, waiting. He could hear the distant sound of thunder and remembered the moment in the Great Hall. When he had stepped forward, he had known what might happen, yet he had done it without regret. He loved Mara, and to protect her, he would not hide behind lies. Truth, no matter the cost, was worth more than his own safety. When dawn came, the bells of the palace rang. The rain had stopped, and the smell of wet earth filled the air. In the court chamber, torches burned against tall walls decorated with banners. The lords and ladies gathered in silence. The queen entered first, dressed in silver and black. Behind her came Mara, looking pale but calm. Ethan was brought in next, his wrists bound with cords. His eyes met Mara's only for a brief second, but that second gave them both strength. Queen Alara took her seat. The chamber grew quiet. Ethan Grey, she said, you stand accused of dishonor against the royal house and of deception toward the throne. Do you deny it? I do not deny it, Your Majesty, Ethan said. I stand here because I love your daughter. Gasps filled the chamber. The queen's hand tightened on the arm of her chair, but she did not interrupt. Ethan continued softly, I know my place. I am not of noble blood. But I did not seek her, Chroni. Sought her heart. If that is a crime, I accept your justice. Mara's voice trembled as she spoke. "Mother, he has not wronged me. He has given me nothing but truth. I will not be ashamed of the man I love." The queen's heart felt torn. Duty told her that justice must be firm, but her spirit whispered that truth must not be punished. She looked at Ethan's calm face and at her daughter's tearful eyes. "Take him back to his cell," she said finally. "The council will decide his fate tomorrow." As the guards led Ethan away, Mara turned to her mother, her voice breaking. "Please do not destroy what little goodness remains in this world." But Queen Alara said nothing. When the doors closed again, she pressed her hands to her face and let out a long, weary sigh. Outside, the clouds began to part, and the first light of morning moved across the palace walls. The truth had been spoken, but the fight for love and honor was only beginning. When the sun rose over Etherian, the palace awoke to a new day filled with uncertainty. The people spoke of nothing except the queen's daughter and the brave guard who had confessed his love before everyone. In the streets, men and women whispered about Ethan Grey and Princess Mara. Some said it was shameful, others said it was romantic. And though the queen had not yet spoken her decision, everyone waited to see what would happen next. Queen Alara sat in the royal council room. The long table was covered with scrolls and silver cups. Her 12 advisors stood around her, each one eager to speak, but none willing to anger her. She rested her hand on the table and looked at them one by one. "You will give me your words," she said quietly. "Speak freely." The oldest advisor, Lord Warren, bowed. "Your Majesty, we must think of the kingdom first. If you allow this match to go unpunished, the other families will lose respect for the crown. Discipline must be shown. The guard must be exiled or worse." A younger counselor, Lady Mara, shook her head. "But my queen, the people see him as honest. If he is killed, he might face unrest. They already speak kindly of him in the markets. His courage has won their hearts." Elara's eyes darkened. "Their hearts are not my concern. This is about order and duty." "But love is part of order too," said another voice. "If you deny what is true, your people will not believe in the justice of your rule." The chamber fell silent. The queen leaned back in her chair, thinking deeply. She knew they were right to fear the loss of reputation, but the thought of sending Ethan to his death made her heart ache in a way she had not expected. Meanwhile, in the guard barracks, Ethan waited. He had spent the whole night without sleep. His cell was small and cold. Through the tiny window, he could see only a slice of the bright blue sky. He thought of Mara, constantly, her voice, her smile, the way she had looked at him with trust even in front of her mother. He did not regret telling the truth, though he knew it might cost his life. In his heart, he believed that love, once spoken, was stronger than fear. Later that morning, Mara entered the council hall without being called. A long white dress flowed behind her as she stepped before the queen. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was firm. "Mother, I beg you to release Ethan," she said. "He has done nothing to harm me or the throne." The nobles gasped at her boldness. No one interrupted their queen this way. Lara stared at her daughter. "You think you understand things beyond your years," she said, "but you do not see the danger. A queen cannot let her throne be questioned because of love." "I do not want your throne," Mara said. "I want only the man I love. If you punish him, you punish me too." The court fell silent again. The queen rose slowly to her feet. "You speak as if love feeds armies and protects borders. Our kingdom is built on more than feelings, child. But without feelings, it will crumble anyway," Mara answered. The words struck the queen deeply, though she did not show it. She waved her hand tiredly. "Take her back to her chamber. I must think." Mara was led away by her maids, tears falling freely now. The queen stood alone in the hall, surrounded by advisors who no longer wished to speak. By evening, the queen walked through the gardens alone. The sky was full of dark clouds, and the smell of wet flowers filled the air. Her mind replayed everything: Ethan's calm honesty, her daughter's trembling bravery. She tried to see this not as a mother, but as a ruler, but her thoughts refused to obey. Suddenly, she saw someone kneeling by the stone fountain. It was an old gardener who had worked in the palace since before her time. He bowed when he saw her. "Your Majesty," he said simply. "Elric," she said softly. "Tell me, how do people forgive what they cannot understand?" The old man smiled faintly. By remembering that the heart has its own kind of truth, Your Majesty. Sometimes what seems wrong at the start turns out to be a gift later. The queen looked into the water, seeing her reflection beside the cloudy sky. For the first time, she felt uncertain of her duty, not because she had weakened, but because she had begun to see that power and love lived in different worlds, and yet both demanded courage. That night she ordered the guards to bring Ethan to the Great Hall again. Torches glowed along the walls. Mara was there too, standing near the throne. When Ethan entered, every sound stopped. Ilara looked down from her seat. "You have spoken truth," she said, "and truth has weight. But a kingdom must stand on law. I will not take your life, but you will be sent away from Etherian at dawn. You may go where you choose, but you shall not return until I say otherwise." Mara let out a small cry. Ethan bowed deeply. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he said. "I will accept your judgment." As he was led away again, Mara ran forward. She cupped his face for one last moment before the guards pulled him back. Their eyes met hers, filled with sorrow, his with calm faith. Queen Ilara turned away, her heart heavy, but her mind set. She had chosen duty, though it broke her. Yet as she walked from the hall, she could not silence the quiet voice inside her saying that love, once born, never truly leaves a kingdom. When morning came, the bells of the palace rang again. The sun touched the towers of Etherian with golden light, but the mood inside the palace was full of sadness. Word of Ethan's exile spread quickly. Many servants who had seen the young guard fight bravely before could not believe he was being sent away. Some said he deserved a hero's place, not punishment. Others kept silent, afraid of angering the queen. Ethan stood at the main gates with 2 soldiers beside him. He wore the same gray uniform he had always worn, though now it looked older and worn from the night spent in chains. He carried no sword, no shield, only the courage in his heart. The road before him stretched long and empty toward the far mountains. Mara watched from her balcony above. Her eyes were full of tears she could not hide. She wanted to run to him, but she knew the guards would stop her. Still, she whispered softly into the wind, as if he might somehow hear her words. "I will wait for you," she said. Ethan lifted his head one last time before stepping through the gates. For just a moment, he thought he saw her in the sunlight, her hair shining like gold. That vision was enough to give him strength. He took a deep breath and began his journey. Days turned into weeks. Ethan walked across villages, forests, and valleys. Everywhere he went, people spoke of the same rumor, the story of the Queen's Guard and the princess who had chosen him. Some called it a tragedy, others a tale of courage. To Ethan, it was simply love, and that was enough. While he wandered far from the palace, trouble began to rise again within the kingdom. Several lords who had long envied the queen's power saw a chance to strike. They whispered among themselves that a ruler who could not control her own daughter was unfit to control an empire. Slowly, they began to gather their armies, planning to take the throne by force. Queen Ilara did not sleep well those nights. She sensed danger in the air but refused to show fear. She held meetings with her generals while her daughter spent her days in the garden, silent and pale. Mara did not complain, but her heart ached every day without Ethan. She often stood by the window, watching the road beyond the hills, hoping to see him return. One evening, a rider came to the castle gates, covered in dust. He brought terrible news. A group of rebel lords had attacked a border village and burned it to the ground. Their armies were moving toward the capital. The queen's soldiers were brave, but they were too few. Ilara listened quietly, her jaw tight and her eyes full of fire. She stood tall and said only one thing: call back every soldier who still carries loyalty in his heart. The message spread throughout the land like wind through grass. In the small towns and lonely mountains, men and women heard the call of their queen. Among them was Ethan. When the messenger reached the village where he had been working as a guard for traitors, he paused only a moment. He still wore no armor, but the flame of duty had never left him. Without hesitation, he returned. The journey back was long, and the nights were cold, but each step brought new strength. He thought of Mara, of the kingdom she would someday inherit, and of the promise he had made in his heart to protect her no matter what. By the time he reached the capital, the city was already preparing for war. The queen's banners waved above the walls, and the streets were filled with soldiers sharpening their blades. When she heard that a lone rider had entered the gates, Queen Alara herself went to see who it was. When Ethan appeared before her, dust-covered and tired but standing tall, silence fell across the courtyard. The guards bowed their heads in respect. The queen looked at him with surprise and something close to relief. "You have returned," she said softly. "I gave you my word, your majesty," he replied. "I will fight for this kingdom, as I once fought for your daughter's life." Alara studied him for a long time. For the first time, she did not see him as a reckless soldier who had broken rules. She saw him as a man who stood by his truth, even when the whole world turned against him. That night, the queen and Ethan spoke of the kingdom's defense. She trusted his advice. And for the first time since his exile, they stood side by side. When Mara heard he had returned, she ran to see him, and they met under the moonlight in the royal garden. Their reunion was quiet but full of emotion. Neither needed to speak much. Her eyes said more than words ever could. She touched his hands, rough from travel, and whispered, "You came back." He smiled faintly. "I never truly left you." Above them, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying the sound of distant drums, the drums of war coming closer. But there, in the quiet garden, it seemed for a moment that love and courage had returned together, giving the kingdom a new breath of life. The storms of battle were waiting just beyond the horizon, yet both knew that whatever came next, they would face it as one with hearts unbroken and spirits ready to defend all they loved. The wind blew hard across the fields outside Etherian. The smell of rain and smoke filled the air as the queen's army stood ready for battle. Lines of soldiers stretched across the hills, waiting for the rebels to come. Flags waved in the gray light, and the sound of drums echoed through the valley. The kingdom of peace now stood on the edge of war. Ethan rode at the front, wearing simple armor that caught the morning light. He had returned, not for reward, but because he could not stand by and watch the kingdom fall. The queen had trusted him again, though she had not said the words aloud. And behind the palace walls, Princess Mara prayed for his safety. Every moment felt endless as she waited for news. From the hilltop, the queen watched her army. She did not wear her crown now, only a cloak, for she wanted her people to see her as their leader, not just their ruler. Her eyes rested on Ethan as he gave quiet orders to the soldiers. The sight of him filled her with a calm she had not felt in weeks. When the rebel forces appeared in the distance, a dark mass of men and banners moving like a storm, a shiver ran through every heart. The rebels were many, and their leaders sought to take everything the queen had built, but Ethan did not flinch. He turned his horse and called out loud enough for all to hear, "We fight not for power, but for truth. We fight for the heart of Etherian, for the queen who leads us, for the hope that love and honor still matter." The soldiers raised their weapons and let out a cry that shook the air. The sound rolled like thunder across the land. Then the two armies met. For hours, steel clashed, and the sky filled with smoke. Ethan moved through the fight like a shadow, defending every soldier who faltered, and breaking every line that threatened to fall. His strength was not only in his arm, but in his courage. When night came, the battlefield was silent, except for the cries of the wounded and the hiss of the dying fires. The queen's army had won. Rebels were scattered, their leaders captured. Ethan stood among the survivors, his sword cracked and his armor dented, but his heart steady. When he returned to the palace, the people of Etherian filled the streets, cheering for victory. Queen Alara came out to meet her soldiers. The sight of her made the crowd fall silent in respect. She looked at Ethan and saw not only the man who had once stood before her accused of shame, but the man who had saved her kingdom. She walked toward him and spoke so all could hear. "Ethan Grey, your loyalty has restored the peace of this land. You have proven that courage and honesty stand higher than birth or title." He bowed deeply. But before he could reply, Mara stepped forward. Her eyes glowed with pride and tears. The queen looked at them both, then turned to the people. "For too long," she said, "we have believed that love has no place in duty. But I have seen with my own eyes that love is not weakness. It is the strength that keeps hearts loyal and hands steady. From this day forward, let truth be our nobility." The crowd roared with joy. Some cried, some laughed, and many shouted Ethan's name. In the days that followed, the city healed. Soldiers returned home, and peace came again to the palace. The walls that had once echoed with anger now echoed with songs of hope. Ethan was no longer a guard, but a hero of the realm. Yet he stayed humble, continuing to serve quietly beside the queen's advisors. Mara spent her days beside him, helping rebuild the lives that had been lost to war. The people loved her kindness and her gentle ways. Wherever she went, there was light and laughter again. One evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, the queen called them both to the garden. The roses were blooming brightly under the golden light. She looked older now, but her eyes held peace instead of worry. "You both have given me something I thought I had lost," she said softly. "You have shown me that love and honor can live together. I cannot change the past, but I can bless the future." She took Mara's hand and placed it in Ethan's. "If this kingdom is to last, it must be built on truth, not fear. You two are the true beginning of that." Tears filled Mara's eyes as Ethan held her hand firmly. The queen smiled faintly and whispered, "Make this kingdom proud." Then she turned and walked slowly back toward the palace, leaving them standing beneath the evening sky. Ethan and Mara stood there in silence for a long time. The scent of roses drifted around them, and in the distance, the city lights began to shine. He looked at her and said, "We have walked through pain and battle to come here. Now we begin again." She smiled through her tears. Together, as the first stars appeared, a soft breeze moved through the garden. The war was over, the fear was gone, and real, strong human love had become the heart of Ethereum. And from that night on, the story of the guard and the princess, the queen and her mercy, lived in every song sung across the land. It was not a story of shame anymore, but a story of courage, forgiveness, and a love that had changed the course of a kingdom forever.